beneath 2 miles of ice lies a continent that holds more secrets than any place on Earth, Antarctica. A frozen wasteland where temperatures plunge to -80 degrees Fahrenheit, where the sun doesn't rise for months, where the howling winds can reach hurricane force. It's the most inhospitable place imaginable. And yet, scattered across the internet, whispered in documentaries, and debated in online forums, there's a question that refuses to die. Could this icy tomb once have been home to an ancient human civilization? Tonight, we're diving deep into one of the most controversial mysteries of our time, because what if everything we've been told about Antarctica is wrong? What if beneath that ice lies evidence of a lost chapter in human history, evidence that mainstream science doesn't want you to see? I'm going to walk you through the most compelling claims, the strangest discoveries, and the heated debates that have divided researchers for decades. But I'm also going to show you something most people never see: the actual scientific evidence, the real data. The facts that either support or completely shatter these extraordinary theories. By the end of this investigation, you'll know exactly what to believe about Antarctica's hidden past. But I have to warn you, some of what we're about to uncover might challenge everything you thought you knew about human history. So let me start with a story that began in 1513 in the court of an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis. Picture this. You're a 16th century cartographer, and you've just created what will become one of the most controversial maps in history. The year is 1513. Christopher Columbus discovered America just 21 years ago. The world is still largely unexplored, and Antarctica won't officially be discovered for another 3 centuries. And yet, your map appears to show the coastline of a continent that shouldn't exist on any chart of your time. This is the Piri Reis map, and it's been driving researchers absolutely crazy for over a century. The map shows the Atlantic Ocean, the coasts of Europe, Africa, and what appears to be South America. But here's where it gets interesting and controversial. At the bottom of the map, there's a landmass that some researchers claim looks suspiciously like Antarctica. Not just any version of Antarctica, but Antarctica as it would appear without ice, with mountain ranges, rivers, and coastal features that weren't supposed to be mapped until modern satellite technology. How is that possible? Charles Hapgood, a professor of science at Keene College, spent years analyzing this map. In 1966, he published his findings in a book called Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. His conclusion was shocking. The Piri Reis map was based on much older source maps, possibly dating back thousands of years, created by an unknown advanced civilization that had mapped Antarctica when it was ice-free. But wait. According to mainstream geology, Antarctica has been covered in ice for over 34 million years, long before humans even existed. So either Hapgood was wrong, or we need to completely rewrite human history. The controversy didn't end there. In the 1,960 seconds, the US Air Force Reconnaissance Technical Squadron actually analyzed the map using modern geodetic techniques. Their conclusion: the mathematical projections were so accurate that they could only have been created using advanced surveying methods and possibly even aerial reconnaissance. But here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. Piri Reis himself left notes explaining how he created the map. He wrote that he used over 20 different source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, others captured from Spanish and Portuguese explorers. He claimed these ancient maps had been passed down through various civilizations for centuries. So we have 3 possibilities. Either Piri Reis was lying about his sources, or these ancient civilizations had mapping capabilities far beyond what we give them credit for, or there's a third explanation that mainstream science refuses to consider, that Antarctica was indeed mapped by an unknown advanced civilization thousands of years ago. The Piri Reis map isn't the only piece of evidence that's got researchers scratching their heads. In the past few decades, satellite imagery has revealed some truly bizarre features beneath Antarctica's ice. Features that don't look entirely natural. Google Earth has become an unexpected tool for amateur researchers. and what they've found has sparked countless debates. Geometric shapes that appear too perfect to be natural, structures that look almost architectural, formations that seem to follow mathematical patterns rather than the random chaos of geological processes. Now, before we go any further, let me be clear about something. The vast majority of these satellite anomalies have perfectly mundane explanations. Wind patterns create geometric shapes in snow and ice. Natural geological processes can create surprisingly regular formations. And sometimes, what looks like a pyramid is just a mountain photographed from the right angle. But here's what's interesting. Not every anomaly has been explained away. In 2016, researchers using ground-penetrating radar made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Deep beneath the ice of East Antarctica, they found what appeared to be a massive subglacial lake system. But this wasn't just any lake system. The formations were so geometrically precise that some researchers began to wonder if they were looking at something artificial. The official explanation was that these were natural geological formations created by tectonic processes over millions of years. But the perfect symmetry, the mathematical precision of the patterns, it was unlike anything they'd seen before in natural formations. And then there's the temperature anomaly. In 2018, NASA scientists detected massive warm spots beneath the Antarctic ice. These weren't small pockets of slightly warmer water. We're talking about areas where the temperature was dozens of degrees higher than it should be. Areas large enough to melt ice from below, creating vast hidden caverns and possibly even ice-free zones. The mainstream explanation? Geothermal activity from underwater volcanoes. Perfectly plausible. But some researchers began to ask a different question. What if these warm spots aren't natural? What if they're evidence of some kind of artificial heating system preserved beneath the ice for thousands of years? It sounds crazy, I know. But remember, we're talking about a continent that's 98% covered in ice up to 2 miles thick. We've barely scratched the surface of what's really down there. The drilling projects that have penetrated deepest into the Antarctic ice have yielded some surprising results. Ice cores from sites like Vostok Station have preserved atmospheric conditions going back nearly 1 million years. And here's what's fascinating: these cores show periods where Antarctica's climate was dramatically different from what we see today. There were times, relatively recently in geological terms, when parts of Antarctica were significantly warmer, times when large areas might have been ice-free or nearly ice-free. The question is, how recently? Some researchers claim that ice core data shows evidence of rapid climate changes that could have made parts of Antarctica habitable as recently as 12,000 years ago. Others point to geological evidence, suggesting that the Ross Ice Shelf, one of Antarctica's largest ice formations, has collapsed and reformed multiple times in the past. But here's where it gets controversial. If parts of Antarctica were indeed habitable in the relatively recent past, why isn't there any clear evidence of human habitation? Why no artifacts, no ruins, no clear signs that ancient peoples ever lived there? The answer might lie in how we're looking for evidence. Most archaeological techniques are designed for temperate climates, not for searching beneath miles of ice in the most hostile environment on Earth. Traditional excavation is impossible in most of Antarctica. Ground-penetrating radar can only see so deep, and even if artifacts exist, they might be buried under ice formations that have built up over thousands of years. But there's another possibility that some researchers have begun to consider. What if the evidence is there, but it's being suppressed? This is where the conspiracy theories really take off. Some claim that governments around the world have discovered evidence of ancient civilizations in Antarctica, but are keeping it secret to avoid disrupting our understanding of human history. Others suggest that advanced archaeological discoveries have been made, but classified for national security reasons. The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959, designated Antarctica as a scientific preserve and banned military activity on the continent. But it also established strict controls over who can conduct research there and what information can be publicly released. Some researchers argue that this treaty isn't just about environmental protection, it's about controlling information. Now, I want to be clear here. There's no concrete evidence that any government is suppressing archaeological discoveries in Antarctica, but the secrecy surrounding certain research projects, the restricted access to large areas of the continent, and the classification of some scientific data has fueled endless speculation. What we do know is that Antarctica holds secrets we're only beginning to understand. Recent discoveries have shown that the continent's geological history is far more complex than previously thought. Satellite imagery has revealed ancient mountain ranges, buried river systems, and geological formations that suggest Antarctica's past was very different from its present. The GOES satellite mission, launched by the European Space Agency, has used gravitational mapping to peer beneath Antarctica's ice in unprecedented detail. What they found is a continent with a surprisingly varied geological structure. Ancient rock formations that date back billions of years, evidence of massive tectonic activity, and geological features that don't quite match what we see in other parts of the world. Some of these discoveries have raised intriguing questions. Why are certain rock formations arranged in such regular patterns? Why do some buried mountain ranges follow geometric alignments that seem too precise to be natural? And why do gravitational anomalies suggest the presence of dense, regularly shaped objects deep beneath the ice? The mainstream scientific community has explanations for all of these phenomena. Natural geological processes, they say, can create surprisingly regular patterns. Tectonic activity can align rock formations in ways that might appear artificial, but are actually the result of millions of years of geological forces. But as we continue to explore Antarctica using increasingly sophisticated technology, we keep finding things that don't quite fit the conventional narrative. Anomalies that push the boundaries of what we thought possible. Discoveries that force us to reconsider our assumptions about this frozen continent. And that's what makes Antarctica so fascinating and so controversial. Every new discovery seems to raise more questions than it answers. Every satellite image reveals new mysteries. Every ice core drilling project uncovers evidence of climate changes and geological events that challenge our understanding of the continent's history. The truth is, Antarctica wasn't always the frozen wasteland we see today, and understanding its climate history might be the key to solving this entire mystery. Imagine Antarctica 34 million years ago. Instead of endless ice sheets, you'd find lush forests stretching to the horizon, warm rivers flowing through valleys filled with vegetation, a climate more like modern-day Canada than the polar desert we know today. This wasn't some brief, warm period. Antarctica remained largely ice-free for nearly 100 million years. But then something dramatic happened at the boundary between the Eocene and Oligocene epochs. Atmospheric carbon dioxide levels plummeted, global temperatures crashed, and Antarctica transformed from a green continent into the ice-covered wasteland we see today. Here's what mainstream science tells us. This transition happened so long ago that it predates human evolution by tens of millions of years. By the time our earliest ancestors were walking upright in Africa, Antarctica had already been locked in ice for eons. But some researchers aren't convinced the story is that simple. Recent climate data has revealed that Antarctica's ice sheets haven't remained completely stable over the past few million years. There have been periods of significant melting, times when large portions of the continent were exposed. Some of these warm periods occurred much more recently than previously thought. Ice core evidence from Queen Maud Land shows that substantial melting occurred as recently as 5,000 years ago. Other data suggests that major portions of the East Antarctic ice sheet experienced rapid melting between 9,000 and 5,000 years ago, during a period scientists call the mid-Holocene. Now, 5,000 years ago might not sound recent, but in archaeological terms it's practically yesterday. That's well within the time frame of recorded human civilization. The pyramids of Giza were built around 4,500 years ago. Stonehenge was completed about 4,000 years ago. If large areas of Antarctica were indeed ice-free or partially ice-free 5,000 years ago, it raises a fascinating possibility. Could ancient seafaring peoples have reached Antarctica during these warmer periods? We know that ancient civilizations were far more capable of ocean travel than most people realize. Polynesian navigators were crossing vast stretches of the Pacific Ocean using sophisticated techniques that allowed them to find tiny islands across thousands of miles of open water. Recent research suggests they may have reached Antarctica as early as the 7th century CE, more than 1,000 years before European explorers. This isn't speculation, it's based on careful analysis of Māori and Polynesian oral histories that describe encounters with a land of ice and snow far to the south. These oral traditions contain details about Antarctic geography and wildlife that seem too specific to be coincidental. But if ancient peoples did reach Antarctica, what would they have found? Even during the warmer periods, Antarctica would have been a challenging place to live. Coastal areas might have been habitable during summer months, but the interior would still have been largely frozen. Any human presence would likely have been temporary seasonal camps for hunting or resource gathering rather than permanent settlements. This presents an interesting problem for archaeologists. Traditional archaeological evidence, pottery, tools, permanent structures, might never have existed in Antarctica. And even if temporary camps were established, any traces would likely have been destroyed by subsequent ice movements or buried under layers of accumulated snow and ice. But there's another type of evidence that might have survived: genetic evidence. Recent advances in ancient DNA analysis have revolutionized our understanding of human migration patterns. Scientists can now extract genetic material from ice cores, permafrost, and even ancient lake sediments. If humans did spend time in Antarctica, they might have left genetic traces that could still be detected today. Several research teams have begun analyzing ice core samples from Antarctica for traces of human DNA. The results so far have been inconclusive, but the technology is still developing. As extraction and analysis techniques improve, we might be able to detect even tiny amounts of human genetic material preserved in the ice. There's also the possibility of finding evidence in unexpected places. Antarctic research stations have been operating for decades, and some of the oldest stations were built on areas of exposed rock where the ice had naturally retreated. If ancient peoples did visit Antarctica, these ice-free areas would have been the most likely places for them to establish temporary camps. A few intriguing artifacts have been discovered at these locations, but their origins remain unclear. Stone tools that don't match the technology of modern research expeditions, carved bone fragments that appear to be much older than any known human presence in Antarctica, organic remains that carbon dating suggests are thousands of years old. The problem is verification. Antarctica's extreme environment can preserve organic material for extraordinarily long periods, but it can also contaminate samples in ways that throw off radiocarbon dating. And the isolation of research stations means that there are often gaps in the chain of custody for potential artifacts. The scientific community has been understandably cautious about these discoveries. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and the evidence so far has been fragmentary at best. But as more research stations are established and more areas of Antarctica become accessible, the possibility of finding clearer evidence continues to grow. Meanwhile, advances in remote sensing technology are revealing new details about Antarctica's hidden landscape almost daily. Ground-penetrating radar can now see deeper into the ice than ever before. Satellite imagery is becoming more detailed and more frequently updated, and new techniques for analyzing gravitational and magnetic anomalies are providing unprecedented insights into what lies beneath the ice. Some of these technological advances have yielded surprising results. Radar surveys have identified what appear to be buried river systems that follow unusually straight paths. Magnetic anomaly maps show patterns of metallic deposits that seem too regular to be entirely natural, and thermal imaging has detected heat signatures deep beneath the ice that don't match known geological features. Each of these discoveries has a plausible natural explanation. Ancient river systems could follow straight paths due to geological constraints. Metallic deposits could be arranged in regular patterns due to specific types of tectonic activity. Heat signatures could result from previously unknown volcanic activity or unusual geothermal processes. But taken together, these anomalies paint a picture of Antarctica that's far more complex and mysterious than the simple ice-covered continent we once imagined. And as our technology continues to improve, we're likely to discover even more puzzling features hidden beneath the ice. The question remains, are we looking at the remnants of natural geological processes that played out over millions of years? Or could some of these features be evidence of something else entirely? Something that challenges our assumptions about Antarctica's past and humanity's place in it. The answer may depend on what we find in the years to come, as advancing technology allows us to peer deeper into Antarctica's frozen secrets than ever before. The search for answers has led researchers to examine every piece of evidence with unprecedented scrutiny, and what they've found has only deepened the mystery. In 1985, a discovery on Antarctica's remote Yamuna beach sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. Professor Daniel Torres Navarro from the University of Chile was collecting marine debris when he stumbled upon human remains, a skull partially buried in the rocky sand. The bones belonged to a young woman, and carbon dating suggested she had died sometime between 1819 and 1825. At first glance, this seemed like confirmation that humans had indeed lived in Antarctica centuries ago, but further analysis revealed a more mundane truth. The woman was likely Chilean, probably connected to 19th-century sealing expeditions that operated in Antarctic waters. She had either been abandoned at the site for unknown reasons, or her body had been buried at sea and later washed ashore, a common practice among sailors of that era. This discovery illustrates a crucial point about Antarctic archaeology. Real human remains do exist on the continent, but they tell a very different story than the ancient civilization theories suggest. They speak of recent human courage and exploration, of sailors and researchers who pushed the boundaries of the known world within the last few centuries. But what about older evidence? What about traces of human presence that might date back thousands rather than hundreds of years? The answer lies in understanding exactly how long Antarctica has been frozen and when it might have been habitable. Recent research has revealed that Antarctica's ice sheets are far more dynamic than previously thought. While the continent has been predominantly ice-covered for millions of years, there have been periods of significant change. The last glacial maximum, which occurred between 26,000 and 20,000 years ago, saw ice sheets expand to cover nearly twice their current area. Sea ice extended far beyond today's boundaries, creating an even more formidable barrier to human exploration. But here's where it gets interesting. As the world began to warm after the last glacial maximum, Antarctica experienced its own period of change. Evidence suggests that between 9,000 and 5,000 years ago, during the mid-Holocene warm period, significant portions of the Antarctic ice sheet experienced rapid melting along their margins. This wasn't a complete thaw. The interior of Antarctica remained frozen, but coastal areas, particularly in regions like Queen Maud Land, saw substantial ice retreat. For the first time in millennia, patches of actual ground became visible. Rivers flowed from melting glaciers. Temperatures, while still frigid by most standards, became survivable for short periods. The timing is crucial. 5,000 years ago, human civilization was already well established in many parts of the world. The ancient Egyptians were building pyramids. Mesopotamian cities were thriving. And most importantly for our story, seafaring peoples were developing increasingly sophisticated navigation techniques. Could these ancient mariners have reached Antarctica during its brief, warm period? The evidence suggests it's not only possible, it's probable. Deep in the oral histories of Polynesian peoples lie detailed descriptions of encounters with a frozen land far to the south. These aren't vague myths or symbolic stories. They contain specific details about Antarctic geography, wildlife, and weather patterns that seem too accurate to be coincidental. The Māori people of New Zealand have maintained oral traditions for over a millennium that describe voyages to what they call the land of the long white cloud that never ends. Their descriptions include details about ice formations, seabirds, and even the distinctive sound that Antarctic ice makes when it cracks, details that could only come from direct observation. Modern researchers have traced these oral histories back to approximately the 7th century CE, suggesting that Polynesian navigators may have encountered Antarctica more than 1,300 years ago. This would make them the true discoverers of the continent, predating European exploration by over a millennium. But if ancient peoples did reach Antarctica, what evidence might they have left behind? This is where the search becomes incredibly challenging. Traditional archaeological methods, excavation, artifact recovery, stratigraphy analysis, are nearly impossible in Antarctica's extreme environment. Most of the continent remains buried under miles of ice, making conventional archaeological investigation impractical. However, advances in remote sensing technology have opened new possibilities for Antarctic archaeology. Ground-penetrating radar can detect buried objects and structures beneath the ice. Magnetometer surveys can identify metallic artifacts or unusual mineral concentrations. And thermal imaging can reveal heat signatures that might indicate human activity. Several research teams have begun applying these techniques to areas where human presence seems most likely. Coastal regions that were ice-free during the mid-Holocene warm period, areas near natural harbors where ancient vessels might have found shelter, rocky outcrops that would have provided protection from Antarctica's harsh winds. The results have been intriguing, if not conclusive. Radar surveys have identified several buried objects in these target areas that don't appear to be natural rock formations. The objects are too regular in shape, too geometrically precise to be random geological features. They're buried under layers of ice and sediment that could have accumulated over thousands of years. Magnetometer readings have detected unusual metal concentrations in areas where no modern human activity has occurred. These aren't the massive metal deposits you might expect from geological processes, but smaller, more discrete signatures that could indicate buried tools or weapons. Most intriguingly, thermal imaging has revealed heat patterns beneath the ice that don't match known geological features. These warm spots are too small and too localized to be volcanic activity, but they're persistent enough to suggest some kind of artificial heat source. Perhaps the thermal signature of buried organic material or metal objects, absorbing and radiating solar energy. None of these discoveries proves human presence in ancient Antarctica. Each anomaly could have a natural explanation, but taken together, they suggest that Antarctica's archaeological potential is far greater than previously imagined. The challenge is verification. Excavating these potential sites would require massive logistical support, extreme weather survival equipment, and permission from multiple international agencies. The cost would be enormous, and the chance of finding definitive evidence remains uncertain. But some researchers argue that the potential payoff justifies the risk. If ancient humans did reach Antarctica, if they left behind even minimal evidence of their presence, it would fundamentally change our understanding of human maritime capabilities and the scope of ancient exploration. The implications extend beyond archaeology into climate science as well. If Antarctica was indeed more accessible to ancient peoples than previously thought, it suggests that the continent's ice sheets are more dynamic and responsive to climate change than current models predict. This has profound implications for our understanding of future climate change. If Antarctic ice can retreat rapidly during warm periods as it apparently did 5,000 years ago, then current projections about sea level rise and global warming effects might need significant revision. Recent ice core studies have provided additional evidence for Antarctica's climate volatility. Samples from deep drilling projects show that the continent has experienced sudden, dramatic temperature swings throughout its history. These weren't gradual changes that occurred over millions of years, but rapid shifts that happened within centuries or even decades. Some of these temperature spikes coincide with periods of known human migration and exploration in other parts of the world. The timing suggests that when global climate conditions made long-distance sea travel possible, they also made Antarctica more accessible than it is today. Advanced computer modeling has begun to reconstruct what Antarctica might have looked like during these warmer periods. The models show a continent that, while still largely frozen, had extensive ice-free coastal areas, flowing rivers, and even patches of vegetation in the most temperate regions. These reconstructions paint a picture of an Antarctica that would have been harsh but survivable for experienced Arctic peoples. Temporary camps could have been established, resources could have been gathered, and most importantly, the continent could have served as a waypoint for long-distance voyages across the Southern Ocean. The question of ancient Antarctic exploration has also gained new relevance due to modern climate change. As global temperatures rise and Antarctic ice continues to retreat, previously inaccessible areas of the continent are becoming exposed for the first time in thousands of years. Research stations are reporting the discovery of exposed rock surfaces, ancient lake beds, and even patches of preserved organic material in areas that were completely ice-covered just decades ago. These newly exposed areas represent unprecedented opportunities for archaeological investigation. Several international research teams have begun systematic surveys of these emerging landscapes, using the latest archaeological techniques adapted for polar conditions. They're looking for any signs of human presence, stone tools, carved objects, fire pits, or even just concentrations of organic material that might indicate human activity. The work is painstaking and dangerous. Archaeological sites in Antarctica must be investigated during the brief summer months when temperatures are survivable. Equipment must be specially designed to function in extreme cold, and every discovery must be carefully documented and preserved in conditions that would destroy most archaeological materials. But the potential rewards are enormous. If definitive evidence of ancient human presence in Antarctica is discovered, it would represent one of the most significant archaeological finds in human history. It would prove that our ancestors were even more capable and adventurous than we previously imagined, and that the boundaries of ancient exploration extended literally to the ends of the Earth. As we continue to develop new technologies for exploring Antarctica's hidden landscape, the possibility of solving this mystery grows stronger each year. Satellite imagery becomes more detailed, radar penetration reaches deeper into the ice, and DNA analysis techniques become sensitive enough to detect even trace amounts of human genetic material preserved in ancient ice. The next major breakthrough could come from any of these technological advances: a satellite image that clearly shows artificial structures beneath the ice, a radar survey that identifies unmistakably human-made objects, or a DNA analysis that finally provides definitive proof of ancient human presence in Antarctica. Until that breakthrough occurs, the mystery remains. Antarctica continues to guard its secrets beneath miles of ice and centuries of accumulated snow. But every new discovery brings us closer to understanding whether this frozen continent truly holds evidence of humanity's most audacious ancient adventure. The investigation continues, driven by the tantalizing possibility that beneath Antarctica's icy surface lies proof that our understanding of human history is incomplete, that ancient peoples achieved feats of exploration and survival that we're only beginning to appreciate, and that the boundaries of human achievement in the distant past were far greater than we ever dared imagine. The reality check hits hard when you start digging into the actual timeline of Antarctica's ice coverage. Because here's what the geological record definitively shows us. Antarctica has been locked in ice for at least 15 million years. Not 15,000 years, not 150,000 years. 15 million years. To put that in perspective, 15 million years ago, our earliest human ancestors hadn't even begun walking upright. The first recognizable hominids wouldn't appear for another 10 million years. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, wouldn't evolve for another 14.8 million years after Antarctica's ice sheets had already formed. This timeline creates an enormous problem for any theory suggesting ancient human civilizations in Antarctica. Even if we push the boundaries and consider the most generous estimates for early human development, we're still talking about a gap of millions upon millions of years. But wait, you might say. What about those warm periods? What about the evidence of melting ice sheets just 5,000 years ago? Here's where we need to be extremely careful about the difference between partial melting and ice-free conditions. When scientists talk about Antarctic ice sheet melting during the mid-Holocene, they're describing marginal changes. The retreat of ice along coastlines, the formation of temporary lakes beneath the ice, small patches of exposed rock in limited areas. They're not describing an ice-free Antarctica. They're not describing conditions that would support human civilization or even temporary human habitation over large areas. Dr. Eric Wolfe, a paleoclimatologist at the University of Cambridge, puts it bluntly. Most people would say 34 million years ago was when the ice sheet first formed in Antarctica. Previously, most of it would have been like northern Canada today, tundra and coniferous forest. 34 million years ago, long before any creature that could remotely be called human existed on Earth. Even during the most recent warm periods, when parts of Antarctica experienced some melting, the continent remained fundamentally inhospitable to human life. The interior stayed frozen. Temperatures remained well below what ancient peoples could survive without modern equipment. And the seasonal variations meant that any brief summer warmth would give way to months of complete darkness and temperatures that would kill any human within hours. So what about those Polynesian oral histories that seem to describe Antarctic encounters? This is where the story gets more nuanced, and actually more fascinating than the ancient civilization theories suggest. Recent research has indeed confirmed that Polynesian peoples, particularly Māori navigators, likely encountered Antarctica much earlier than European explorers. But the timeline is crucial. We're talking about encounters that occurred around the 7th century CE, not thousands of years ago. These weren't permanent settlements or evidence of ancient civilizations. They were likely brief encounters by some of the most skilled ocean navigators in human history who managed to reach the edge of the Antarctic ice sheet during exceptional voyages. The oral traditions don't describe thriving cities or advanced technology. They describe exactly what you'd expect encounters with a harsh, frozen land that was unsuitable for human habitation. The distinction matters enormously. Polynesian navigation represents genuine human achievement, the ability to cross vast oceans using sophisticated techniques that allowed them to find tiny islands across thousands of miles of open water. But this real achievement gets overshadowed and diminished when it's mixed up with fantasies about ancient Antarctic civilizations. What about all those satellite anomalies, those geometric patterns and unusual structures visible in Google Earth images? Here's where we encounter one of the most persistent problems in modern pseudoarchaeology: the tendency to see patterns where none exist, especially when looking at low-resolution satellite imagery of one of the most geologically complex places on Earth. Antarctica is massive, larger than the United States and Mexico combined. It experiences extreme weather conditions that create all sorts of unusual ice formations. Wind patterns carve geometric shapes in snow and ice. Glacial movement creates regular patterns as ice flows around obstacles. Seasonal melting and refreezing can produce formations that look artificial when viewed from above. Professional geologists and glaciologists who specialize in Antarctic conditions have examined every major satellite anomaly that's gained attention online. Without exception, they've been able to provide mundane explanations rooted in well-understood geological and meteorological processes. The supposed pyramids visible in satellite images, mountain peaks photographed at angles that emphasize their triangular profiles, the artificial structures, natural rock formations revealed by wind-blown snow patterns, the geometric patterns, ice formations created by entirely predictable physical processes. But here's what's particularly telling. When these anomalies are examined with higher resolution imagery or investigated by researchers on the ground, they consistently turn out to be natural formations. Not once has a satellite anomaly proven to be evidence of artificial construction. This pattern should give us pause. If ancient civilizations had built structures in Antarctica, if they'd engaged in large-scale construction projects, wouldn't at least some of these anomalies prove to be genuinely artificial? Wouldn't we find at least one structure that couldn't be explained by natural processes? The absence of any confirmed artificial structures in decades of satellite observation is itself significant evidence against ancient civilization theories. What about that famous Piri Reis map, the one that supposedly shows Antarctica's ice-free coastline centuries before the continent was officially discovered? This map has been analyzed exhaustively by cartographers, historians, and Antarctic specialists. The consensus is clear. The map does not depict Antarctica. The confusion arises from a fundamental misunderstanding of 16th century cartographic practices. Medieval and Renaissance maps routinely included hypothetical landmasses based on geographical theories rather than actual observation. The southern landmass on the Piri Reis map most likely represents Terra Australis incognita, a theoretical southern continent that mapmakers assumed must exist to balance the landmasses in the northern hemisphere. More tellingly, Piri Reis himself left notes on his map describing the southern landmass as hot and inhabited by large snakes. This description bears no resemblance whatsoever to Antarctica, but it matches perfectly with the theoretical Terra Australis that appeared on many contemporary maps. Modern geodetic analysis has confirmed that the southern portion of the Piri Reis map shows significant geographical inaccuracies when compared to Antarctica's actual coastline. The supposed correlations that impressed earlier researchers were based on selective interpretation and a misunderstanding of the map's projection system. Charles Hapgood, the researcher who popularized the Antarctica interpretation in the 1960 seconds, made crucial errors in his analysis. He mistakenly believed that Antarctica had been ice-free as recently as 4000 BC, a time frame that would have made ancient mapping theoretically possible. But ice core data has since proven that Antarctica was completely ice-covered throughout that entire period. The US Air Force analysis that seemed to support Hapgood's conclusions was based on incomplete data and has since been superseded by more accurate geographical surveys. When modern satellite data is compared to the Piri Reis map, the correlations disappear entirely. So what are we left with? What does the actual scientific evidence tell us about Antarctica's past and the possibility of ancient human presence? The geological record is unambiguous. Antarctica has been predominantly ice-covered for millions of years, long before humans evolved. Even during brief periods of marginal warming, the continent remained fundamentally inhospitable to human habitation without modern technology. Ice core data spanning hundreds of thousands of years shows no evidence of human activity. If ancient civilizations had existed in Antarctica, they would have left traces, changes in atmospheric composition from fires, pollutants from metalworking, or organic compounds from human habitation. None of these signatures appear in the ice core record. Archaeological surveys of the limited ice-free areas in Antarctica have found no artifacts or structures that predate modern exploration. Every human remain discovered on the continent has been traced to 19th or 20th century expeditions. Advanced remote sensing techniques, ground-penetrating radar, magnetic surveys, gravitational mapping have revealed Antarctica's hidden geological structure in unprecedented detail. While these surveys have uncovered fascinating information about the continent's deep geological history, they've found no evidence of artificial structures or buried civilizations. Even the most exotic claims about warm spots beneath the ice have straightforward explanations. Geothermal activity from underwater volcanic systems can create localized heating. Natural geochemical processes can produce heat signatures that might seem anomalous, but are actually well within the range of known geological phenomena. The scientific picture that emerges is actually more fascinating than any ancient civilization theory. Antarctica represents one of Earth's most extreme environments, a continent that has remained largely isolated from biological activity for millions of years. It preserves a record of Earth's climate history that extends back further than almost anywhere else on the planet. The real archaeological treasures of Antarctica come from the heroic age of polar exploration. The huts left by Scott and Shackleton, the artifacts from whaling stations, the remains of early research expeditions. These genuine historical remains tell extraordinary stories of human courage and determination in the face of impossible odds. But they also remind us of just how challenging Antarctica is for human survival, even with modern equipment and support systems. The idea that ancient peoples, lacking cold weather gear, reliable shelter, or modern navigation equipment, could have established thriving civilizations in such an environment stretches credibility beyond the breaking point. This doesn't diminish human achievement in other areas. Ancient civilizations accomplished remarkable feats of engineering, navigation, and cultural development. Polynesian navigators did cross vast stretches of ocean with remarkable skill. Ancient peoples did create sophisticated maps and astronomical observations. But Antarctica represents a bridge too far, a limit beyond which even the most capable ancient explorers could not venture and survive for extended periods. The persistence of ancient Antarctica theories, despite overwhelming scientific evidence against them, reveals something important about how we process information in the digital age. Dramatic claims spread faster than careful analysis. Mysterious satellite images generate more excitement than mundane geological explanations. And the romantic appeal of lost civilizations often overshadows the genuine achievements of real historical peoples. But there's also something deeper at work. These theories tap into a fundamental human desire to believe that our ancestors were more capable, more adventurous, and more connected to the wider world than mainstream history suggests. In some ways, this instinct is admirable. It reflects a recognition that ancient peoples were often more sophisticated than they're given credit for. The problem arises when this admirable instinct leads us to ignore evidence and embrace theories that can't withstand scrutiny. Because when we do that, we actually dishonor the real achievements of ancient peoples by replacing their genuine accomplishments with fantasy. The truth about human exploration and achievement is remarkable enough without embellishment. Ancient navigators did cross vast oceans. Ancient engineers did build structures that still inspire awe today. Ancient astronomers did create sophisticated systems for tracking celestial movements. But they did all of this within the bounds of what was physically possible given the technology and knowledge available to them. And those bounds, impressive as they were, did not extend to establishing civilizations in Antarctica. Understanding these limitations doesn't diminish human achievement. It helps us appreciate just how extraordinary the things ancient peoples actually accomplished truly were. As we continue to explore Antarctica with increasingly sophisticated technology, we will undoubtedly make new discoveries. We'll learn more about the continent's geological history, its role in global climate systems, and the remarkable adaptations of the few life forms that managed to survive in its extreme environment. But these discoveries will tell us about natural processes, not ancient civilizations. They'll reveal the secrets of ice and rock and atmosphere, not the ruins of forgotten empires. And perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Because Antarctica's real secrets, its role as a repository of climate history, its unique ecosystems, its geological complexity, are far more profound and important than any imagined ancient mystery. The frozen continent holds keys to understanding Earth's past and future climate. It preserves in its ice sheets a detailed record of atmospheric conditions, stretching back nearly 1 million years. It serves as an early warning system for global climate change, with its ice sheets responding sensitively to temperature variations that could affect sea levels worldwide. These real mysteries of Antarctica, how its ice sheets will respond to warming temperatures, what its geological history tells us about tectonic processes, how its unique ecosystems survive in extreme conditions, represent some of the most important scientific questions of our time. They're questions that require careful observation, rigorous analysis, and respect for evidence. They can't be answered by wishful thinking or selective interpretation of ambiguous data, but they can be answered through the patient application of scientific methods, the same methods that have definitively ruled out the existence of ancient civilizations in Antarctica. As we stand at the threshold of unprecedented climate change, Antarctica's real secrets have never been more important to understand. The continent serves as both a record of past climate variations and a predictor of future changes. Its ice sheets contain enough water to raise global sea levels by nearly 200 feet if they were to melt completely. Understanding how these ice sheets behaved in the past, how they're responding to current warming, and how they might change in the future, represents one of the most critical scientific challenges of our time. Getting these questions right could literally determine the fate of coastal cities around the world. In comparison, debates about imaginary ancient civilizations seem not just misguided, but almost frivolous. They distract attention from real scientific work that has genuine importance for humanity's future. The choice is clear. We can continue chasing fantasies about lost civilizations, or we can focus on understanding Antarctica's real role in Earth's climate system. We can waste time debating satellite anomalies that have already been explained, or we can support the scientists who are working to understand how ice sheet dynamics will affect global sea levels. We can indulge in romantic notions about ancient explorers conquering impossible environments, or we can appreciate the genuine achievements of modern researchers who are actually working in Antarctica under conditions that would have killed any ancient explorer within hours. The real story of Antarctica is more important, more urgent, and ultimately more fascinating than any ancient mystery could ever be. It's a story that's still being written by scientists working in the most extreme conditions on Earth to understand our planet's past and predict its future. That's the story that deserves our attention. That's the mystery that actually matters. And yet, even as we confront this mountain of evidence against ancient Antarctic civilizations, there's something that keeps drawing people back to these theories, something that makes them resilient to debunking, immune to scientific refutation, and more popular than ever in our internet age. It's not just about Antarctica anymore. It's about what Antarctica represents. Think about it. We live in a world where every square inch of land has been mapped, photographed, and catalogued, where satellite imagery can show you the roof of your house in real time, where it seems like there are no frontiers left, no unexplored territories, no places where genuine mysteries might still hide. Except for Antarctica. Here's a continent that remains 98% hidden beneath miles of ice. A place so hostile that even with all our modern technology, we can barely scratch the surface. A landscape that could conceal entire mountain ranges, river systems, even cities, and we'd never know they were there. In a world that feels completely explored, Antarctica represents the last blank space on the map, the final frontier where our imagination can still run wild, where the impossible might still be possible. And that psychological pull is incredibly powerful. But here's what's really interesting about these theories they've evolved. The early claims about ancient civilizations were relatively straightforward. Ancient peoples somehow reached Antarctica. They built structures. Evidence of these structures exists, but is being suppressed. Modern Antarctica theories have become much more sophisticated and much more difficult to debunk. They incorporate cutting-edge science, reference classified military projects, and weave together disparate pieces of information in ways that can seem compelling if you don't look too closely. Take the claims about underground warm zones. Early theories simply stated that these areas proved ancient civilizations had heating systems. Modern versions reference legitimate scientific discoveries about geothermal activity, then extrapolate far beyond what the evidence actually supports. The newer theories don't claim there are visible pyramids in Antarctica. They suggest that artificial structures exist deep beneath the ice, detectable only through advanced radar systems that most people can't access or verify. They don't claim ancient maps show ice-free Antarctica. They argue that these maps show Antarctica as it appeared during brief windows when advanced reconnaissance techniques might have been possible. Each iteration becomes more sophisticated, more difficult to fact-check, and more resistant to simple debunking. But sophistication doesn't equal accuracy, and the fundamental problems remain the same. The timeline issue hasn't disappeared. Antarctica's ice sheets are still millions of years older than human civilization. The brief warm periods that did occur still didn't create conditions suitable for large-scale human habitation. And the complete absence of any verified archaeological evidence still represents an insurmountable obstacle for these theories. What has changed is how this information gets presented and consumed. In the pre-internet era, claims about ancient Antarctic civilizations would have been limited to specialized books and magazines. They would have been subject to some level of editorial oversight, and they would have reached relatively small audiences. Today, anyone with a YouTube channel or a blog can present themselves as a researcher and reach potentially millions of people. Complex scientific data can be cherry-picked and presented without context. Professional-looking documentaries can mix genuine scientific information with wild speculation in ways that make it difficult for non-experts to tell the difference. The result is a kind of information ecosystem where dramatic claims spread faster and wider than careful analysis, where mystery and speculation generate more engagement than mundane explanations, where the boundaries between legitimate research and creative storytelling become increasingly blurred. And Antarctica, with its genuine mysteries and inaccessible location, becomes the perfect canvas for these kinds of theories. Consider how a typical modern Antarctica theory gets constructed. It starts with a grain of truth. Satellite imagery does show unusual formations. Scientific research has detected geothermal activity. Ice core data does reveal climate variations. Then speculation gets layered on top of facts. The unusual formations become too regular to be natural. The geothermal activity becomes evidence of artificial heating systems. The climate variations become proof of habitable periods. Finally, the absence of definitive debunking evidence gets presented as evidence itself. If these formations are natural, why won't scientists explain them publicly? If there's nothing to hide, why is access to Antarctica so restricted? If ancient civilizations didn't exist there, why are governments so secretive about Antarctic research? It's a rhetorical strategy that puts the burden of proof on skeptics while shielding the original claims from falsification. And it's remarkably effective at maintaining belief even in the face of contradictory evidence. But there's something else happening here that goes beyond just the mechanics of how these theories spread. They're serving a psychological function that has very little to do with Antarctica itself. These theories allow people to feel like they have access to hidden knowledge, like they're part of an enlightened group that sees through official narratives to deeper truths, like they're intellectual rebels challenging establishment orthodoxy. In a world where many people feel powerless and disconnected from scientific institutions, These theories offer a way to feel special and informed. They provide simple explanations for complex phenomena, and they suggest that the world is more magical and mysterious than mainstream science admits. The problem is that this psychological satisfaction comes at a cost. It requires ignoring evidence, dismissing expert knowledge, and embracing theories that can't withstand scrutiny. And when this pattern of thinking becomes habitual, it doesn't stay confined to questions about ancient Antarctica. It spreads to other areas where scientific consensus conflicts with appealing alternative narratives. Climate science, medical research, space exploration, evolutionary biology. The same rhetorical techniques that sustain ancient Antarctica theories get applied to increasingly important questions with real-world consequences. The stakes become much higher when this kind of thinking influences decisions about vaccination, environmental policy, or public health measures. This is why the Antarctica debate matters, even though ancient civilizations almost certainly never existed there. It's a laboratory for understanding how scientific misinformation spreads in the digital age, how genuine mysteries get transformed into unfalsifiable conspiracy theories, and how psychological needs can override critical thinking. The patterns we see in Antarctica theories appear everywhere in modern discourse: the cherry-picking of data, the appeal to hidden knowledge, the transformation of absence of evidence into evidence of cover-ups, the creation of unfalsifiable claims that sound scientific but can't be tested. Understanding these patterns helps us recognize them in other contexts where they might be more dangerous. But there's also a more positive way to think about the appeal of Antarctica theories. They reflect genuine human curiosity about the unknown, a desire to believe that there are still frontiers to explore, mysteries to solve, and discoveries that could revolutionize our understanding of the world. These are admirable impulses. The problem isn't the curiosity itself, but the direction it takes when it becomes disconnected from evidence and rigorous methodology. The real Antarctica is actually far more mysterious and fascinating than any imaginary ancient civilization could be. It's a continent that preserves nearly 1 million years of climate history in its ice. It hosts unique ecosystems that survive in conditions that would be lethal to most life on Earth. It plays a crucial role in global ocean circulation and weather patterns. It's a place where researchers are making genuine discoveries that expand our understanding of biology, climatology, and geology, where international cooperation has created one of the most successful environmental protection regimes in human history, where the effects of global climate change are playing out in ways that will determine the future of coastal cities worldwide. These real mysteries offer opportunities for genuine exploration and discovery. They provide ways to contribute to human knowledge that don't require abandoning critical thinking or ignoring evidence. But they also require patience, specialized knowledge, and acceptance that some questions don't have simple or dramatic answers. The choice between real and imaginary mysteries reflects a broader choice about how we want to understand the world. Do we want knowledge that makes us feel special and confirmed in our existing beliefs? Or do we want knowledge that's accurate, even when it's complex, uncertain, or challenges our preconceptions? Do we want to be entertained by appealing stories about ancient civilizations, or do we want to grapple with the difficult realities of climate change, environmental protection, and scientific uncertainty? The Antarctica debate forces us to confront these choices explicitly. It strips away the ambiguities that exist in other scientific controversies and presents us with a clear case where the evidence points overwhelmingly in one direction. And our response to that evidence reveals something important about our relationship with knowledge itself. The researchers working in Antarctica today are engaged in genuinely heroic work. They're conducting science under conditions that would have killed any ancient explorer within hours. They're living for months at a time in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. They're making discoveries that could literally save coastal cities from drowning. They deserve our respect and support, not suspicion and conspiracy theories. The real story of human achievement in Antarctica isn't about ancient civilizations that never existed. It's about modern scientists and explorers who are pushing the boundaries of human knowledge under impossible conditions. It's about international cooperation that has kept an entire continent dedicated to peaceful scientific research. It's about discoveries that are helping us understand our planet's past and predict its future. That story is more inspiring than any ancient mystery because it's real. It's happening right now. And unlike imaginary ancient civilizations, it offers opportunities for genuine participation and contribution. You can support Antarctic research. You can learn about climate science. You can advocate for environmental protection. You can pursue scientific education that leads to real discoveries rather than imaginary ones. The choice is ours. We can continue chasing fantasies about lost civilizations, or we can engage with the real challenges and opportunities that Antarctica presents. We can waste time debating theories that have already been thoroughly debunked, or we can focus on understanding the genuine mysteries that scientists are actually working to solve. We can indulge in romantic notions about ancient explorers, or we can appreciate the courage and dedication of modern researchers who are doing the real work of exploration and discovery. The real Antarctica needs our attention more than any imaginary one ever could. Because the discoveries being made there right now will determine how well we understand and respond to the environmental challenges that will define the next century. The ice sheets of Antarctica hold keys to our future that no ancient civilization ever possessed. The climate data locked in those ice sheets could help us predict sea level rise, understand ocean circulation changes, and prepare for environmental shifts that will affect billions of people. The biological discoveries being made in Antarctica's extreme environments could lead to new medicines, new technologies, and new understanding of life's limits and possibilities. The geological research being conducted there is revealing new information about Earth's deep history, tectonic processes, and the formation of continents. These are the real treasures of Antarctica, not imaginary pyramids or ancient artifacts, but actual knowledge that can improve human life and help us understand our place in the universe. And unlike the fantasies about ancient civilizations, these treasures are accessible to anyone willing to engage with evidence, support scientific research, and accept that the most profound mysteries are often found not in speculation about the past, but in careful observation of the present. The frozen continent continues to guard its real secrets, but those secrets are yielding to patient scientific investigation, not wild theorizing. They're being revealed through ice core analysis, not satellite anomaly hunting. They're being discovered by researchers with advanced degrees and specialized equipment, not amateur investigators with YouTube channels. And the secrets they're revealing are more important for humanity's future than any ancient mystery could ever be. The question isn't whether Antarctica holds evidence of ancient human civilizations. The evidence definitively shows it doesn't. The question is whether we're ready to face the real mysteries that Antarctica presents, and whether we have the wisdom to act on the knowledge that scientists are working so hard to provide. Because in the end, the most important secrets in Antarctica aren't about where we came from, but where we're going. And understanding those secrets might be the key to ensuring we have a future worth going to. So where does all this leave us? After diving deep into satellite images, analyzing ancient maps, examining climate data, and following the trail of evidence wherever it led, what can we actually conclude about Antarctica's hidden past? The scientific verdict is clear and unambiguous. There is no credible evidence that ancient human civilizations ever existed in Antarctica. The continent has been locked under ice for millions of years, long before our species even existed. The brief periods of marginal warming that did occur were nowhere near sufficient to support human habitation. Every supposed piece of evidence, from satellite anomalies to ancient maps to mysterious structures, has been thoroughly examined and explained through well-understood natural processes. But here's what I find fascinating about this entire investigation. The more we learn about Antarctica's real history, the more extraordinary it becomes. We're talking about a continent that preserves nearly 1 million years of Earth's climate record in its ice. A place where life exists in conditions so extreme, they're helping us understand what might be possible on other planets. A frozen laboratory where international cooperation has created one of the most successful environmental protection treaties in human history. The genuine mysteries of Antarctica, how its ice sheets will respond to climate change, what its ancient geology tells us about continental formation, how its unique ecosystems survive in impossible conditions. These are questions that matter for our future, in ways that no imaginary ancient civilization ever could. And yet, the persistence of these theories tells us something important about human nature. We want to believe that our ancestors were more capable than we give them credit for. We want to think there are still unexplored frontiers, still mysteries waiting to be solved. We want to feel connected to something larger than ourselves, something that transcends the mundane realities of modern life. These aren't bad impulses. The problem arises when they lead us away from evidence rather than toward it, when they make us dismiss the work of dedicated scientists in favor of speculation and wishful thinking, when they distract us from real challenges that demand our attention and action. Because here's the thing about Antarctica that nobody talks about in the ancient civilization theories: it's changing right now, in ways that will affect every coastal city on Earth. The ice sheets that have remained stable for thousands of years are beginning to show signs of instability. The warming that's occurring in parts of Antarctica today is happening faster than scientists expected. The implications for global sea levels, ocean circulation, and climate patterns are still being studied, but early indications suggest we may be in for changes that dwarf anything in recorded human history. This is the real Antarctic mystery that deserves our attention. Not imaginary pyramids under the ice, but actual ice disappearing into the ocean. Not ancient maps showing impossible knowledge, but modern satellite data showing unprecedented change. Not theories about lost civilizations, but evidence about our civilization's impact on the planet. The researchers working in Antarctica today aren't treasure hunters searching for ancient artifacts. They're climate scientists trying to understand how ice sheets collapse. They're biologists studying how life adapts to extreme conditions. They're geologists mapping the hidden landscape beneath the ice to understand how continents form and break apart. Their work is harder, less glamorous, and infinitely more important than any search for ancient ruins could ever be. They're living for months at a time in the most hostile environment on Earth, not because they expect to find evidence of lost civilizations, but because the data they collect might help us predict and prepare for environmental changes that will affect billions of people. They deserve our respect, our support, and our attention. Not our suspicion, our conspiracy theories, or our romantic fantasies about what Antarctica might be hiding. The truth about Antarctica is more urgent, more consequential, and ultimately more fascinating than any ancient mystery. It's a story that's still being written by scientists working in impossible conditions to understand our planet's past and predict its future. It's a story where the stakes couldn't be higher, because the answers they find will determine how well we're prepared for the environmental challenges of the next century. So the next time you see a video claiming to show ancient structures in satellite images of Antarctica, or read an article about mysterious heat sources under the ice, ask yourself this: what am I not seeing while I'm focused on these theories? What real scientific work is being done in Antarctica that might actually affect my life and the lives of my children? Because somewhere right now, in a research station perched on the edge of the world's most inhospitable continent, scientists are drilling ice cores that contain 500,000 years of climate history. They're measuring ice sheet movement with GPS devices that can detect changes measured in millimeters. They're studying microorganisms that survive in conditions that would kill anything else on Earth. They're doing the real work of exploration and discovery. They're finding answers to questions that matter for humanity's future. And they're doing it all in a place where the very air can freeze your lungs if you breathe it wrong. So here we are at the end of our journey through Antarctica's frozen mysteries. We've examined every claim, followed every lead, and confronted every piece of evidence that suggests ancient humans once walked across this impossible continent. And what we've found is both disappointing and remarkable. The evidence is overwhelming and definitive. There were no ancient civilizations in Antarctica, no lost cities beneath the ice, no advanced cultures that mapped the continent before it froze. The timeline simply doesn't work. The climate data doesn't support it. And despite decades of searching with increasingly sophisticated technology, not a single piece of verified archaeological evidence has emerged. But here's what I hope you take away from this investigation. The real Antarctica is far more extraordinary than any imaginary ancient civilization could ever be. Right now, as we speak, this continent holds keys to understanding our planet's future that could determine the fate of every coastal city on Earth. Ice cores being extracted by researchers working in conditions that would kill most people within minutes contain climate data spanning nearly 1 million years. Discoveries being made in Antarctica's extreme environments are teaching us about the limits of life itself. The genuine mysteries of Antarctica aren't about where humanity has been, they're about where we're going. And unlike the fantasies about ancient civilizations, these mysteries have real answers that we desperately need to understand. The choice is ours. We can keep chasing theories that have been thoroughly debunked, or we can focus our attention on the scientists who are doing the actual work of exploration and discovery under impossible conditions. We can support research that might help us prepare for environmental changes that will affect billions of people, or we can waste time debating satellite images that have already been explained by natural processes. The most important secrets in Antarctica aren't hidden in the past. They're being revealed right now by researchers who deserve our respect and support. Because understanding those secrets might be the key to ensuring we have a future worth protecting.